everybody. Welcome back to the Rob and Hal Show. I am your host, Rob, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Hal.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hal, how you feeling, man?
I'm annoyed.
Yeah, I can tell. The people can't see your face, but I can read your expression really well.
Starting out the show annoyed.
Well, we are back in the studio, and that's a lot better than our last few weeks of stress-induced horror.
Yeah, I don't mean to laugh, but that does that's funny. Because I was actually on vacation with my wife in Wildwood, New Jersey. You were here at my house. It was actually a pretty good time, wasn't it? You were here. You had fun.
Yeah, I was
watching the kids, watching the house, watching the animals.
Yeah, I was pretty much here at the Bronx Zoo. All the birds, the cats, the dogs, the kids, and everything was fine. And then when you guys got back, I went home, and that's when the shit hit the fan, so to speak. So anyway, my parents, evidently their air conditioner was leaking inside the living room, and
for 2 weeks.
For 2 whole weeks. And it's a mystery because none of them, they were scratching their heads. Well, we didn't know. Well, how could you not know? It's like a slow faucet leak on your carpet. Anyway, the walls were damaged, the carpet was damaged, and we fixed the wall.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for you and Brian, I would have been completely fucking lost, because if you put a drill in my hand, the only thing I know what to do with that drill is to give myself a complete lobotomy.
Yeah, and I'm sure after everything that you've dealt with for the past week or two, you've wanted to do that. I know I have.
Well, I took some time out of my day in between doing all this home repair stuff, and I was reading an interesting article on Annoyance. And I found, I dug up an old National Geographic magazine, which isn't really that old, maybe a year and a half, a year or whatever. And I was talking about how people just get annoyed by things like flies buzzing around your face or people chewing very loudly.
I hate that one.
Yeah, and it got me to think, like, 90% of my fucking day I'm annoyed.
Yeah, actually, I think I am too.
And we deal with things that we don't want to deal with for the majority of the day. And then for times like these, just sit in a studio and spout all of our aggression and our anger. That's actually the good part of the day. But this article was very, very interesting because they brought a scientific approach to annoyance and how it affects everyday lives and trying to figure out a way to combat that. Now, there is no miracle pill. There's no drug or whatever to take, but they're trying to pinpoint how to fix it to make our lives less stressful. And the one thing they brought up was, phone conversation. If you're listening to somebody else having a conversation on their cell phone, you can hear only half of the conversation. You can't hear the person on the other line.
Oh, that just annoys the hell out of me.
Yeah, and our brains tell us, like, we need to know everything. So that is an annoyance. And for me, I have so many things I'm annoyed with, aside from myself. But yeah, the loud chewing when you're eating and you're sitting next to somebody who chews very loudly. Or what about the gulpers, man?
Oh,
the people who decide to drink a full glass of water or some sort of beverage, and they're just, and you just want to smash them in the Adam's apple.
And then they gulp one more time.
They take their last gulp.
I think that's what it would sound like if you hit me in my Adam's apple.
Yeah. Well, another thing they brought up too was social media. How ever since social media came into society and our everyday life, it's like we have to know things that we shouldn't know because it's just there on a screen.
Yeah.
So we are putting ourselves in these everybody else's stressful lives just by reading their bullshit.
Yeah, I think we also stress ourselves out, and this goes along with the, getting annoyed throughout the day, because the more stressed out you are, the easier it is to annoy yourself, to become annoyed. So I read this one article the one time where it said we see snapshots of people's lives, and it takes 2 seconds to stop and smile, take a nice picture of yourself, and put it up online, and everybody's all they see yesterday, today, from noon today, and then 4 o'clock today, and 6 o'clock today, and then getting ready for bed. You're just smiling constantly, and then that person thinks to themselves, I'm not that happy. They're way happier than me. So I can see where seeing things like that constantly, especially with social media, will cause you to be more stressed out, because you feel like that person has a better life than you. Why can't you live a life like that? And of course, you're going to be more annoyed at things the kids are running around while you're trying to watch TV, and you stick a foot out and trip them, as they're running through.
Yeah.
I'm just joking.
Yeah. Well, the thing I don't like about social media is how people have just reduced themselves. And I'm not talking about everybody. I'm not talking about everybody. I'm talking about a few people who they'll say things like, I remember the old Facebook post where somebody would post, "Hey, if you're reading this, you're still on my friends list."
Yeah.
And
I remember that one.
I'm like, dude, you wouldn't say that if you were. Can you imagine being in a room full of people?
Yeah.
Pointing to everybody and going, "Hey guys, you're still my friend.
You're here. You're my friend.
You are mine." I would just get up and walk out of the room.
Yeah.
I don't understand why that's even a post.
You're a douchebag, so I'm leaving.
If you don't like somebody or whatever they're saying is annoying you, delete them and let it be. And don't post your dinner on your timeline every goddamn day. I know what a fried chicken wing looks like.
Do you?
It's very delectable.
It is.
I know what a greasy cheeseburger looks like. I don't need to see it on your plate every day.
Yeah, unless you're eating something very exotic.
Where's the artistic merit there, Hal?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're eating something absolutely exotic, I mean, what would it be? What would be something we haven't seen in our life?
Oh, I would just love to see somebody eat a fucking squid and then have the squid fucking tear their throats out or something. That'd be interesting. Hey guys, I'm going to eat a squid today. Watch this.
And then I got to gulp the whole time.
Oh.
But if you're going to, say you go to Japan or something, and you're eating the local cuisine, I could see you're on a trip. Of course you're supposed to post pictures. Not when you're taking a trip to your kitchen.
Yeah,
grabbing
but
a burger.
Even then, why do I need to see a picture of your food?
Yeah. I agree. I guess we agree and disagree a bit, because I think if you're out and about, that's what annoys me.
Yeah, or just the people who just. I remember seeing this one person. I'm not going to name any names, but they talked about their kids all the time. How great they were doing and how they're succeeding in this. And I remember going to the local county fair and seeing that same person, and they were just, they looked like they didn't even want kids in their lives.
Well,
they were like, "Let's go, keep up, what are you doing?"
I remember you saying something along the lines of, I remember this story. I remember you telling the story where they were actually Parent of the Year on social media.
Yeah.
And then you saw them at the local fair, and they're actually pretty much assholes. They look like pretty big dicks.
Yeah, they just
dick.
And I don't know, they just didn't seem like they were, they were with their kids, and it didn't seem like they were the Parent of the Years in that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't abusing them or anything. It was just so different from what you read.
Yeah.
They weren't being mean. They look stressed out. They just look like they didn't want to be there. I don't know.
Which is actually what parenting is being stressed out a lot of the time.
And then going home and bragging about how great of a parent you are.
Yeah. Well, I don't brag about anything, but
and maybe that one was a little too far off, because I could sit here and tell my son, "Hey, straighten up, be a good kid. Don't grow up to be an asshole. And then at the end of the night, when he's laying down and go to sleep, and I'm like, good night, buddy. It was all worth it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I just don't feel a need to go onto Facebook and tell people what a great parent I am.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't need to do that. We had Facebook for centuries and centuries, and nobody ever had to do that, so we don't need to do it now. But I just thought it was interesting that I read an article on things that were annoying me as I was being completely annoyed in my life.
Yeah, but I think I have to rewind here for a minute.
Sure.
You just said we had Facebook for centuries and centuries.
We didn't. Okay, I meant we didn't have Facebook for centuries and centuries.
Maybe I just
we
misheard
don't need
you.
it now.
Maybe I just misheard. Yeah, so...
and that brings me up to another point. People who don't know how to communicate properly.
Like me?
Yeah.
Fuck off.
I'll try. It might be actually better than doing this podcast. But yeah, Hal, that's what I did. That was my 2 weeks, and you were kind of there with me going through it.
Yes, and as soon as I went, I enjoyed myself that whole week, and as soon as I went back to work, that night, everything was crazy. So, it's almost like you pay for your vacations.
Yeah. Yeah, when you get the time off, you better take it wisely and relax as much as you can, because when you get back into the cycle, it hits you like a brick.
What?
Oh, I had a great time. And then somebody, as soon as you walk into your employment, is going to ruin it and remind you that you're not on vacation anymore.
Yep. Yeah, it always seems like you have to work twice as hard when you get back. I'd make up for lost time.
It's like people are just envious that you were gone and had a good time, so they want to just dig in there and piss you off. But yeah, that was my 2 weeks, and I'm sure other people have it worse. But I was just completely annoyed, and the fact that I am not a handyman made it worse. My father and I went to Lowe's. And it was like two astronauts discovering a new planet for the first time.
Yeah.
We didn't know where we were going. We had no clue what was going on. We were trying to find, different size insulation, and I had no clue what the studs looked like within the walls. It was just a complete mess.
Yeah,
I bought the wrong drywall.
Yep.
I bought the wrong insulation. Anything that I could have messed up, I did.
Well, when you came back and you actually had regular molding and not crown molding, which goes up around your ceiling, that's what I thought you had the first day. I was like, oh, he bought fucking crown molding.
No, I looked at the sign there. It said window and floor.
Oh,
so
yeah,
definitely.
I guess it does have. So. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just but it's good to be back in the studio.
And this is something that we've wanted to do for a long time. I remember when I was a kid, I used to pretend I was on the radio and everything, and we would play little tape cassettes and all that.
Yeah.
We're still new at this. So,
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of error, a lot of trial, tribulation, but I think one thing we have to get past is the fact that we're not going to be perfect ever. We wanted to talk a little bit about the explosion in Beirut.
Yeah, you saw that, right? Did you see how bad that was?
Yeah, it was pretty devastating.
It was like what did they call that? The mushroom, like the plume.
Yeah.
And then a huge shockwave that came through. And there was actually, what did they say, 150 people killed? And wounded thousands.
Yeah.
I mean, and they said something about there was a warehouse that held like 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate. Right. So, of course, that's what was used in the Oklahoma City bombing. Do you remember that?
No.
Oklahoma City?
Yeah, I mean, I remember Oklahoma City. I don't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oklahoma City. I just don't remember.
He used fertilizer bombs.
Oh.
Yeah, and same thing, ammonium nitrate. And yeah, man, it was just the devastation there was this one video I saw where there was a bride standing there, and they were taking some video of her. I guess I don't know if it was like B-roll or what kind of stuff it was, but yeah, they're taking video of this lady, taking pictures of her, and then just everything.
Oh yeah, they were just documenting her day, you know. And
yeah, and it's crazy how it was all caught on film, and this was just from the shockwave. It wasn't the actual explosion.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, you can even see some of the footage that was taken during the explosion. I mean, those people were rocked.
Oh yeah.
You know, even being the distance away that they were still rocked by the explosion. And you know, it's easy for everybody to come out of the woodwork and start saying, you know, different things. I mean, there's two options, or there's two factors. It's either negligence or you know, something more nefarious.
Mm-hmm.
And the president of Lebanon actually said that, and he wants France to give him some satellite images to see if there were any aircraft in the air that day or whatever, to just to see what's going on here, because it's dangerous to start speculating things.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, you just can't get in there and say, well, there was a bomb. You know, let's do some investigative work and see what's going on first before, especially this country, starts dipping our toes into things. And who knows, because everybody can speculate, but then when you're proved wrong, you just look like an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course that's what our president did. You know, he went out the first day and said that I don't think they even found all the bodies yet, and he was already saying that it was a bomb, you know. And it very, very well may have been a bomb. You know, there's no questioning that the problem is that our
it could have been anything. But if it's negligence, if it was just sitting there, I mean, you know, we do know something happened.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. A building exploded. So, and there are casualties, which is never good. And I think that's what gets lost in all of this, is the fact that people die. And we have become so desensitized with things that we see now on the news and websites that, you know, allow people to upload videos where people are jumping to their deaths and stuff like that, that we always push that to the, you know, the tragedy part of it is pushed to the back burner, because we just want to fuel the masses with whatever agenda we have. So it's dangerous to speculate, man. We have to get the facts. We have to get the proper evidence, and, you know, just see what happened.
Yeah, you're right, man. We definitely can't speculate on anything. You know, we'll find out sooner or later what it was, and I'm sure the proper authorities will deal with it. You know, I scrolling through the news. Did you see where there was thousands of those bikers heading to South Dakota for that rally? There was like 250,000 of them.
Really?
Yeah, and I mean, with the pandemic going on.
Oh, the Sturgis
right now,
rally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, and you know, I know people want to get out there. They want to. Everybody's been sitting around and doing. If you're not working right now,
yeah,
you know, you're sitting around doing nothing. I understand everybody wants to get out there, but this is not going to keep this virus from spreading. You know, and I know it's not as bad as everybody makes it sound. But it's still a dangerous virus. I mean, it can cause long-lasting effects.
I think it's every bit as bad as what people make it out to be, because it's proven that it's killed people, and I just think we're there's a time now that people are just not afraid of it anymore, and they're just doing what they want. They're not wearing their masks. They're not, you know, staying 6 feet apart. They just don't really care. At this point, not everybody, but a majority of people are just out there doing what they want to do without the mask on, and this thing is spreading again, and the numbers are going up again.
Yep.
And I think we're on our way to another lockdown.
And I'll tell you what, I think we're still I could be completely wrong, but I think we're still in the first phase of this, aren't we? We never made it through the first phase because we didn't allow it.
Yeah, we didn't give it enough time. It would have been hard. It would have been hard, but we should have shut the entire country down.
Yeah.
For like 2 weeks. Just stock everybody up, shut it down. I mean, it's easier said than done, but, I work in a grocery store at this point, and I wasn't protected during this thing.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that I didn't get it, but, if people are still going to grocery stores, because where do you think everybody went? They couldn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
They were just hanging out in a grocery store for 2 hours.
Yeah, you were telling me about that, how these people come and they would buy and buy and buy the same thing every day.
Well, not only that, it got to the point where I would watch the same 2 or 3 people talking for 2 hours. It's like, this is not a hangout. Get your stuff and go home so I can be safe.
Right.
If you want us to continue to stay open and not infect us with this stuff, get your stuff and go home. This is not a hangout. It's not an amusement park. It's not, just go home. So yeah, that was very aggravating when this thing first started, because I didn't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think any of us knew. And when this first came out, it was more like, you get this, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing that people are making it through. You can't listen to our president is no help. He's never been a help. I've always been very critical of him, and I'm going to continue to be very critical of him. When he was first elected, my first words were, well, now he's a president. He's the president. I wish the best for him. I wish that he's successful in making things great.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to put your money where your mouth is, man, let's do it.
Well, he wasn't my choice, but I'm the same way. I mean, I remember when Obama was elected, and there was a few Republicans who were like, I hope he fails it. Why?
Why do you want the president to fail?
Yeah, I don't
want them to do well, but
I didn't vote for Trump, but I don't want him to fail, because that would affect me and my family and friends, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And
but 4 years later, it's clear that
he's succeeded at something, but it's definitely not making this country great, I'll tell you that. So we have at this time, we have no second stimulus deal. Trump's talking about possibly issuing an executive order. I don't know really what it all entails, but it does have to do with the fact that there's been no terms that have been completely agreed upon.
Well, I read somewhere too that if we were in such a debt from the war and stuff,
yeah,
this stimulus would have been in the thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we spend what is it, billions a year on military, which I think is both necessary and
our
unnecessary.
country is in a huge deficit. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's in the trillions.
We owe trillions to China, from what I know.
It's just and this stimulus would have been 10 times more than the 1,200 that we saw.
Yeah. Well, there was somebody on Twitter one day, and they said something along the lines of, I almost panicked, but then I remembered a couple weeks ago I got $1,200, and it was tongue in cheek, because there's people in New York with signs that are saying your $1,200 stimulus doesn't even cover our rent for a month. So how are we supposed to live? Because
what I think the stimulus was for, because you're right, I lived in New York.
Mm-hmm.
A $1,200 stimulus wouldn't have even scratched the surface for rent.
Yeah.
So what I think it's for is for people to put back into the economy.
Oh yeah, it's definitely about the top dogs.
Click on Amazon, keep ordering that stuff,
mm-hmm.
or go and support your local business, which I'm all for. Just don't tell me it's for rent, because it doesn't even cover it.
No,
it does not even cover rent. Not in certain areas. Did you see that On top of all this other stuff, did you see that there's a new salmonella outbreak with onions and stuff like that?
Yeah, and actually, we just went and bought some onions. I mean, I guess everybody did, but
yeah, dude, no matter what you do, there's always, and that comes back to the stress factor. No matter what you do, you're always going to see or read something that's no good. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, that's just like there's been plague. We haven't completely eradicated the plague. There's still a couple cases per year. So I mean, it's not something we should be afraid of, because all of our life people have been getting the plague. But it just seems like it's an overabundance of fear these days.
Well, yeah, because
what can you not be afraid of?
Exactly.
For once,
every time we're scrolling through the news now, and there's not one thing in there that's actually optimistic. It's about fear and a new salmonella outbreak, or an explosion somewhere, or more about the coronavirus and the stimulus that we might not get now. It's just it's a good way to just keep you stressed.
Yeah, and speaking of the stimulus and just the whole coronavirus and people quarantining and all that, you and I didn't get to do any of that. We were speaking earlier about annoyance. That's something else that would get on my nerves, was when people would go on social media and during this quarantine, blah, 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 and I would get annoyed, and I think even a little jealous at the fact that I was still busting my ass because we're considered essential workers. And I get an extra $1 an hour hazard pay for it. I don't know if you do. That was my company's decision. The type of place that I work in, our production just picked up.
Yeah.
Because people are buying extra things.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to replace the types of products that we create. We need to replace them now, because people are panic buying. They need 15 of this instead of just 2 now, because they're afraid that it's not going to be there. And what I've been saying from the beginning, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that there's not going to be enough toilet paper out there. There's not going to be enough of this. There's not going to be enough of that. Well, the thing is that there's not enough of it. Well, now there is, because I think people have settled down. But in the beginning, there wasn't enough of it, because we fulfilled that prophecy. We bought way too many packs of toilet paper, way too many packs of of paper towels and all that, and everything else that you need throughout the month, your miscellaneous essentials.
Yeah, well, life is crazy. There's no doubt about that. But tonight's main topic is essentially wrongful convictions, and this has been going on since as early as the Salem Witch Trials.
Yeah, and even earlier.
Yeah, it was a pivotal point in American history. Most people know the case, but I don't know if people realize it wasn't that long of a period before they started to realize, hey, we really messed up, and the regret started setting in.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I actually thought that went on for a long time. It just went on for a couple of years, right?
Not even a couple years. From 1692 to 1693.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't really that long of a time, but essentially how I remember it starting out was, or what I've read, because I obviously wasn't there, but it was just total hysteria. And they believed witchcraft was running amok in their little village, and they just started accusing anybody who acted weird or anything, and they would just condemn them. And there were up to about 200 people accused, and I think 19 were killed, executed, hanged for their being a witch.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of that. I actually remember thinking that people were burned at the stake when we heard a lot about that when we were kids, but that's actually not true.
Well, yeah, Europe was doing that stuff.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the actual Salem Witch Trials. I used to get them mixed up, I guess. I think a lot of people did.
Well, in Europe, they really got inventive with their methods of execution, but here they were mostly hanged. I think maybe one person was, what do you call that when they just pile rocks on top of you to like crush you?
I think crushing, stone crushing.
Stone crushing or something.
I don't think it's called stoning.
It's not stoning, because stoning is more or less when you stone somebody to
like
death.
knock somebody in the head, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of that has to do with today's society of how people were wrongfully convicted, and unfortunately, it's younger people, people of color. A lot of it's racial profiling, and a lot of that has to do with hysteria as well.
Yeah, and it's like the Central Park 5 case.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely racial profiling.
Oh yeah.
But then you have a case like the West Memphis 3 where they just stood out. They were different.
Yep.
They listened to heavy music. They wore black. One of the kids, Damien Eccles, was into Aleister Crowley and different sorts of philosophy. And it just went... I think what happens in a lot of these cases is there's a need for authority to step in and solve the crime. So a lot of times when they're under this sort of pressure and they're scrutinized, they just handpick who they want, who kind of stands out, and that's really absurd because there doesn't seem to be any real like police work involved.
No.
I know with the West Memphis 3, they interrogated Jesse Kelly for hours and hours, and he had a very low IQ. He had no legal representation. He had no parent or guardian. He was well under the age of 18. So that to me was kind of illegal, I believe.
Unless the laws have recently came into effect, I believe that's illegal, completely illegal.
And when you watch the documentaries, and I know there's going to be people out there saying, well, the documentaries left a lot out and blah, blah, blah. But there's enough in those documentaries to steer you in the direction that there was some very shoddy police work. And, when you watch the trial, because HBO went down there thinking this was a satanic thing, because satanic panic did exist.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And they went down there thinking they were going to do a documentary on these 3 kids who satanically killed these 3 younger kids. And when you get into the trial, when in the courtroom, it was blatantly clear that this was just a shit show. You know what I mean? Like, they had people testifying that were basically mail ordered. How do you say it? PhDs and stuff like that. Like, they called themselves experts, but they had no actual authentic certificate to back that up.
Yeah.
Aside from something that you get in the mail.
Yeah. Cracker Jack.
And looking back, I mean, this was like 1993. Looking back now, all the DNA proved that what they said were satanic, ritualistic cutting and stuff like that was actually animals that had bitten and teared off skin from these kids that were in this little tiny wooded section of Arkansas.
Right.
I think it was called the Robin Hood Hills, something like that.
Yeah, and that's the issue with...
And DNA never linked any of these kids.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with the Central Park 5 when, there was DNA found, in the rape kit that...
yeah.
I know that DNA was not as advanced as it was, or as it is now, but there was reports that the DNA alone should have exonerated these kids.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing about, especially the Central Park 5 cases. They just kind of handpicked who they wanted to be guilty.
Yeah, and I read somewhere where it said that there was at least 10, 12 people in the park that day.
Yeah.
They thought there was a group of 30 some teenagers or whatever that committed all these crimes, and who did it turn out to be in the end? There was actually some guy in jail that admitted to all this.
Yeah.
And these kids lost years. I mean, how many years were they in jail? It was crazy.
Yeah, it was too many years, man. Too many years. But yeah, they had the guy who did it was sitting there in prison. But if we're going back to the West Memphis 3 case, 3 little boys were murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And the need to quickly wrap this thing up and just accuse anyone came fast and swift. It was like a month. And there was never really any evidence that they were even around that part of the area where these kids were murdered. And when you look at like how they got out of jail, it took years and years and years of DNA profiling. Like, there was no DNA. And when they were released, they were released on the Alfred plea, which means that they had to plead guilty in order to get out of prison.
Yeah, and that's
because they didn't want they didn't want these kids to come back on the state of Arkansas.
right, and you can't get away from that once you.
Yeah, you're not even totally exonerated.
No, you're not, because
so your name still your name is still associated with horror, but you didn't do it. But not everybody's going to believe that. I believe they didn't do it. I think there's enough evidence to prove that they didn't more than they did. But there are still people who believe they are murderers.
Right.
And that's a stigma they're never going to get away from.
To me, I'm a bit indifferent about it. I really don't care.
What do you mean you don't care?
It's not that I don't care. It's that
could have been us, man. We were the ones dressing in black, had long hair. We weren't reading the same thing everybody else was reading. That
I just feel like there's not enough compelling evidence to me to say that they didn't do it.
Well, where's the compelling evidence to say they did do it?
That's why I'm saying I'm indifferent. I'm not saying they did do it. I'm not saying they didn't
when
do it.
When you murder somebody,
mm-hmm.
there is always traces of DNA. The only DNA they found was from one of the fathers, stepfather.
Right, but the thing is back then they wouldn't have. If a murder were to happen today in 2020, the people that come to the crime scene, the CSI, is more highly trained to look for DNA. They want trace DNA. They know what to look for. Common things that you would touch, or back then they didn't know all that stuff. So there could have been things that was not collected at all.
Well, yeah, and it was in a wooded area, so some of it could have been washed away.
Mm-hmm.
But there was enough that they did collect, because DNA is on everything.
So what does that mean? The father did it then? Well,
it just means that the father was the closest to the kids. Meaning, as far as the ones that were accused, they weren't even near these kids. So the only DNA found on them was on a strand of like a piece of rope or something. That was the stepfathers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I don't think it's one of those things where the police department already believe they got their people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really not even like they're investigating anything anymore.
Right.
They looked into the stepfather, and the father of the other guy, John Byers, he is kind of he's had his issues with breaking the law and stuff, which doesn't mean he's a murderer.
Right.
But none of these people were perfect, and any one of them could have done anything to these kids because they were there.
But in the case of Central Park 5, there was a woman jogger. What was her name? Trisha.
Yeah,
Miley
or something like that.
Okay, and
Miley. Yeah.
They found her in critical condition. There was more than just these kids in the park. They actually thought there was a group of 30 teenagers that were committing all these crimes and that.
Yeah.
What does it say? They took into custody 14 or more other suspects over the next few days and arrested a total of 10. They were ultimately tried. But, as you were saying, when we were talking about this, like brushing up on this actual topic, you were saying that these kids, the police were chasing somebody else in Central Park. And these kids were just like, oh, shit, we're going to run.
Yeah.
How were they actually wrongly convicted?
Honestly, I think they were handpicked because some of these kids didn't even know each other, and they were just linking them into, they would have them in the interrogation room. They were just linking them to these other people who they barely knew, if they knew them at all. And, when you're a young kid and you have detectives breathing down your throat telling you, just tell us the truth and you can go home, because that's what they did to, Jesse Miskelly. Just tell us the truth. We'll let you see your dad. We'll let you, when they do these to these young kids, I mean, think about when you were a young kid. Think about if like one of your daughters, because these kids were like, look how young they were. The oldest was 16.
Yeah.
So think about one of your kids in an interrogation room being swayed to say things that are not even true.
Right.
They just think that they're going to go home once this is all done.
I disagree with some interrogation tactics. I think
I do too.
You need to get to the bottom of it, and somebody is going to lie over and over and over again, and you're going to break them down. But for instance, did they have parents with them at the time? Did they have? Were they even? They were read their Miranda rights, correct? Or
yeah,
does it say anything about that?
Yeah, the parents were allowed in, but they didn't really have representation either. You know what I mean? They didn't have. A parent isn't legal representation.
No,
because the parents didn't know. The parents, their kids were just playing in a park.
Yeah.
So the parents could have been manipulated as well.
Yeah, it says here that analysis indicated none of the suspects' DNA matched either of the 2 DNA samples collected from the crime scene, from the jogger cervix and running socks, but results were reported as inconclusive by the police.
Yeah,
and this was back in 90. Yeah, January of 90. So,
well, I don't know if that was when they were indicted.
Oh, I scrolled too far up.
Yeah. It was more like
right here, February of 90.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I don't get is how can you charge somebody for a rape and attempted murder when their DNA doesn't even match?
When there's no DNA. That's exactly what.
Well,
that's exactly what all these
DNA.
cases. All these cases are the same when it comes to DNA, because DNA is 100%. Or what is it, like 99.999% accurate? That's what DNA is for, because it's, like I said, it's very, very accurate. There's no getting away around it.
Right.
That's why you see, like, if cops suspect a serial killer who they have collected, because, they weren't inept back then either. They would collect, how many times have we heard that a guy who was on a murderous rampage in a span of time in the 80s.
You're right.
They were smart enough to keep things and freeze them or preserve them, and then this DNA is still there. It doesn't go away. So they'll sneak around and they'll steal like napkins and silverware, and they'll get DNA from that. You know what I mean? And that's how a lot of these guys are caught now that have been on the run or essentially unfounded for years. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And I think, a lot of this has to do, seeing the Memphis 3 or West Memphis 3 and Central Park 5, a lot of that has to do with stereotypes and a bigoted mindset where you are different from me. So
we fear you.
We fear you, and you are more likely to do something illegal because you're not like me.
Exactly.
Like that mindset of saying like, oh, there's a black teenager walking down the street, I gotta lock my car doors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's being racist. That's being a bigot. I think I can use the word bigot when I say there's a kid walking down the street with black hair, a band shirt on, ripped jeans. The same thing. It doesn't matter if he's black, white, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a stereotype, and I think it's bigoted thinking.
Right. Yeah, because what you don't understand, you fear.
Absolutely.
And that goes back to the Salem Witch Trials. The medicine wasn't what it was back then, what it is today.
Right.
How do we know those kids, they just weren't being kids?
Right. There's
convulsing and just being goofy and just, you know what I mean? Because they were children.
Mm-hmm.
And they had no they had no evidence at all, physical or otherwise, that these were even, it was just hysteria, just religious hysteria.
Right.
Well, look at how goofy kids act today, like just being kids, just being goofy, making weird noises or jumping around or, frolicking around in a yard or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what these kids were, and everybody was behind it too. People would accuse people, and neighbors would accuse neighbors because it was just hysteria. Once you start that ball rolling, it's very dangerous.
Yeah, and once, especially with kids, if you start paying attention to their bullshit, sometimes kids just like to make shit up, which is fine. Like it's fun. You know what I mean? Like we did it when we were kids. We used to play make believe and everything.
Hell yeah!
But then when the adults get behind it and they're like, "Oh, but what they're saying is true," that the kids can't. It's hard for a kid to pull back and be like, "Wait a minute," because they don't want to get in trouble by the adults, so they just keep going and going and going. And I forget the exact details of the Salem Witch Trials, but I do know.
Well, there's not a lot of...
Some people recanted the story, didn't they?
Well, they realized really quick. That's why people think it happened for years and years and years. It happened within a span of a few months.
Yeah.
And then they quickly realized, like, oh, man, like, this is all bogus. There's a lot of regret. Actually, some of the families of the victims of the Salem Witch Trials were given restitution for the murders of their loved ones.
Right.
So they were repaid. They were compensated.
Yeah, and there's even things where people are found innocent. You can't get out of jail right away.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice if I was like, hey, you didn't do it, you can go?
Get out of here.
Yeah. But it's not, they stay imprisoned, and there's times that they're there for a very long time.
Well, yeah, that's because people have a hard time admitting their flaws.
Well, I think it's also
their failures
with the fact that our system is so flawed to begin with, and everybody talks about how flawed it is, but nobody actually does anything to fix it.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, you could do more time for a drug charge than really hurting somebody. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have discussed a little bit of everything today and a lot of nothing. As always, we are here, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Hopefully you got something out of this. The cases that we talked about are heavily researched. There are documentaries. There are books. Anywhere you look left or right, you'll find something on these subjects. They're on a number of the streaming platforms that you probably have. So, yeah, just check out these things. Do your own research. Maybe you disagree with us, and that's fine. That is totally fine. But do your research and look into these cases and come up with your own conclusion. Have anything else, Hal, before we close?
Nope.
All right, everybody. Well, that has been the Rob and Hal Show, another less than stellar edition. We will see you next time. Until then, everybody have a safe and happy week. Take it easy.